In firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. For over 20 years, the FireStore has equipped first responders with trusted gear featuring brands like MSA Carnes for helmets and Seek for thermal imaging cameras. Stay prepared. Visit thefirestore.com today. The FireStore, your trusted safety partner.
This podcast is brought to you by Flex 7 from TenCate Protective Fabrics. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology. Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencatefabrics.com/Flex 7.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with Magnegrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit Magnegrip.com.
Hey everybody, Anthony Castro's here. It is time for the Command Show, and I'm excited to introduce my normal host and co-author of our new book, Mastering the Fireground Command, Calm the Chaos, Brian Brush, but also a very special guest today, a dear friend of ours, Battalion Chief Brett Loomis from the Corvallis Fire Department. And Brett is going to join us here in a little bit. We'll introduce him formally. But I want to start today's show with a acknowledgement of a dear brother of ours who passed away from Houston Fire Department. Marcelo Garcia passed away recently, died on a warehouse fire in Houston Fire Department. He was part of 23B shift. And our hearts, prayers, thoughts go to his family and to the Houston Fire Department for this loss. And we don't know any details. We're not here to speculate or even talk about it other than ask you to keep your thoughts and prayers aimed at he and his family in the fire department. That's what this is about. This show is about saving civilian lives and keeping our troops safe. So it's important that we acknowledge those things, which takes us to the NIOSH 5. We always talk about lack of or improper risk assessment, communications, accountability, incident command, and SOPs or SOGs, not just line of duty death causes, but pretty much any and every dysfunctional fireground operation can be traced probably back to one of those 5 things. So with that in mind, we're going to talk about size up today. And we have a special guest who contributed to our book. And Brian, why don't you kind of give us an opener as to what we're doing today and where we are in the book?
Well, we're, kind of continuing that path of working through the text. And, we covered the anatomy and physiology of the incident in the last episode, kind of brief touch on that. But we want to continue to build, and we want to continue to bring in those voices of experience that we tapped into in this book to expand the message. And Chapter 5 is really important. It's great to have Brett on this to discuss his contribution on Size Up, but it's also really important to view this as that risk gain management. And I think, Chief, you do a great job on talking about risk gain and how we set that up. So it should be a great conversation today. The Size Up in particular is one of those things that people tend to limit the scope on it. They tend to just think of that Size Up as being that initial view of the incident. We make it very clear that Size Up is constant. It is ongoing. It is at all 3 levels. And we really want to speak to that. It's beyond that initial radio report. Everyone arriving, changing positions, changing locations on the fireground should be conducting another Size Up. And that's really kind of what's fun about having Chief Loomis here in this discussion and his contribution. It's just one of those where, upon arrival, nothing was showing, but nothing showing means nothing. We got to keep being aggressive and finding that problem. Just because the problem wasn't present for us, it was present for those who called us, and it's our duty to seek it out. So, Brett, thanks for joining us and contributing your senior nose piece to this conversation. If you would please just give us a little bit of your background and your location and your contribution.
Well, I'm gonna cut him off because he's too modest. He'll say some stuff, but he's way too modest. Let me give him an appropriate. He'll say, "My name's Brett Loomis. I'm a bald guy. Hi, nice to see you. How are you? How's it going? How you doing?" So Brett Loomis, a dear friend, he's in his 37th year in the fire service, currently a battalion chief for Corvallis, Oregon Fire Department, home of the Oregon State Beavers. Hallelujah.
Yes, it
And
is.
Brett started his fire service career back in the mid 80s. And the beautiful thing about him is A, he's modest, B, he's a great leader, one of the finest leaders I've ever known in the fire service. And he started as a volunteer and has worked his way all the way up the ranks, even as interim fire chief for the Salinas Fire Department, which is in Monterey County. Very, very busy fire department right here in Central California. And lots of fires, shootings, stabbings, a small city with a big city problems. I think their population now is over 100,000 now, probably well over that.
Yeah, they're in the 170,000 range.
Yeah, pushing 200,000.
High density. Yep.
High density, gang violence. You ran a lot of fires, a lot of commercial fires, a lot of structured fires over the years, and you were a mentor to countless folks who are now the chiefs of the organization, fire chiefs and so forth.
Yeah.
And Brett's been a master instructor for the state of California. He's got his master's degree in fire service management, and of course all the alphabet soup after his name. But one of the things I love about Brett, he's a dear friend. He's one of our lead instructors at trainfirefighters.com. Without Brett, we wouldn't exist. Probably the book, the curriculum, the impact we're having on the national level wouldn't be happening without Brett's hard work and the trust that we have in him. So whether it's Brian or Brett, I can't think of two more amazing, wonderful brothers and best buddies I could be with today. So I'm excited about this. We're going to let Brett talk about the senior nose, which was his contribution in the book. So now you can take it away.
Yes. Andoni's absolutely right. I would have not said any of that stuff. I would have said, "Hey, how you doing?"
Walks on the beach,
Right. Yep. It's Monday morning. I just got off of 48 and let's talk about fire stuff. And that's kind of where it would be. So so the senior knows, I was thinking about how do I open this when we kind of talk about it? And I'm going to rewind back to being a, junior volunteer in my hometown in Pacific Grove, California. And that was a time when every Sunday we changed all the hose on the engines, right? Because remember, it was double cotton jacket, big brass couplings, and you couldn't have the folds in the same place, right? And there was a captain there who at the time when I was a young kid, I just did not understand why every coupling had to be lined up on the rack the way it was. And, the 3-inch couplings had to be 18 inches above the ground and the 1.5-inch couplings had to be this far above the ground, right? But I look back now 37 years later and I'm very thankful for all of the influences there. And then when I stepped into a paid role in Salinas, I felt like I was, part of Johnny and Roy. The first engine I ever drove Code 3 was a 1972 open cab Ward LaFrance fire engine with a 5-speed, manual transmission, double 3-inch reverse lays, Elkhart brass nozzles on the 1.5-inch cross lays, right? I mean, I was living the dream. And so there weren't things called ticks. And if they were, we didn't have the money to buy them. So, I was so fortunate to be influenced by some really, really good fire officers and really, really good firefighters that taught me that I had to use my senses, right? I had to use my sense of sight and smell and hearing and touch and grow through that intuitiveness. And that, over the years, a lot of trial and error. And, we arrived at the incident that's described in the senior nose. And, just as it's described in the book, right? It's a Friday night. Believe it or not, it rains in the Pacific Northwest. I didn't know if any of you knew that.
Really?
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah, it does. It just happens. And we grabbed this first alarm job. And I'm a small department. I've got 4 stations on when everything's in service. I have 4 engines and I have 2 2-person medic units. And all of my surrounding mutual aid is volunteers. And so we have to get it done. And fortunately, I had everything in service. And told the lieutenant at headquarters to bypass the truck and bring the engine because it's super tight, super tight craftsman style homes, narrow streets. Anyways, we get in there and my first in company does the nothing showing. I go through the motions. I lean in on all of my incidents, and we're running an incident like there's fire until we demonstrate that there is not. And they go in and investigate, and the first lieutenant in, good company officer, I trust him a lot, and he said, "You know what, Chief? I think we can cancel everybody. I'm going to keep my medic unit, but I'd like you to meet me at the front door." And that was kind of hint number one, right? I was like, "Oh, okay," but yeah, I'm going to trust him, and I let the companies go, and I walked up, and he told me, he's like, something just ain't right. I smell something. I don't know what it is, but I smell something. It's not quite electrical, but it's not quite fire. It's a little chemical-y, but I'm not really sure. And I said, okay, well, let's take a look. And I literally was not 3 steps in the door. And I was like, well, there's something burning in this house. And like I described in the article, I immediately regretted releasing the first alarm. And I should have, learning lesson for you existing and new command officers, at a minimum, I should have called back another company and just had them staged there, right? Because I didn't know what was going on. I didn't do that because in a very small system like mine, I don't have backup chiefs. This is a nighttime fire on a weekend. I don't have backup chiefs. And not only am I responsible for managing the incident, but I still have to manage the rest of the city. And I have to cut resources loose because if I get medicals or car crashes or other things, my next closest ambulance is a 17-minute code 3 trip. So I have to balance some stuff. So anyways, learning lesson for me. And I met with the homeowner who described, I asked him to tell me the same story that he told the first aid crews. And I had been told there's no basement. I had been told there's no attic. Okay. So, tying this back into victim profiling and, getting the signal, right? We don't take people's word for it that everybody's out. Even if they say it's my house, I'm the only one there and they're out. What is it? It's a low victim profile, right? So there was some trust that was given because they saw vaulted ceilings and, those types of things. But as I poked around the house, I discovered 2 attic spaces, over the second floor bedrooms. I discovered a finished, unfurnished room in the basement space, and son of a gun, that's where we found the crawl space under the house. And thank goodness that we have Proby firefighters to stick in those tiny spaces, because there's no way that this, bald fat chief is going to be slithering around underneath a
attic rats.
Look at attic rats, right? They're not going to do it.
So can I pause one sec because you're going awesome, and I want to do a couple takeaways that you've already thrown out there for everybody. One, you already knew the neighborhood you were going into was a craftsman style neighborhood and tight spaces, right?
Yep.
And so that's why you, even before you left the barn, you say, hey, let's take the engine because the truck won't fit. Yep. So that's part of size up. And we talk about that in the chapter about size up. It starts pre-incident. It starts with your crew. It starts with your neighborhoods, your areas, your target hazards, your pre-plans. And so you already instinctively just said, hey, I don't think we can bring the truck into this. And you're already thinking about that. And you knew the neighborhood you were going into. And that, to me, size up started, before the incident, obviously, when we teach that in the class and in the book. But then when you got in there, you did the trust but verify level of size up, where you've got a typical, hey, company officers first. He talks to the homeowner. And what's nice about this fire, and why we wanted to talk about it and why it's in the book, is because it shows all of the critical elements of size up, but in a non-critical incident. So you can really talk about them and slow it down and say, okay, let's break this down, whether it's the interaction with the captain, the interaction with the homeowner, finding that you had, a finished basement, that you had crawl spaces and attic spaces, and all that stuff happens in such a tight time frame when you have a working fire.
Right.
But in this case, you had something going, but you had the discretionary time, which allows us to kind of open it up and examine it more. So great stuff.
Yeah, and it absolutely, as much as anything, it was a teaching incident, right? It was a teaching incident for me. It was a teaching incident for the companies. And was it an escalating incident? I would categorize it that, but it was a very slowly escalating incident, right? Rewind to when we were all in the academy and they were teaching us about combustion. Slow oxidation is rusting, fast oxidation is burning. And we weren't actively burning, but there was something affiliated that was rusting along and getting a little bit worse every minute. So, we looked at a picture of the wall with a tick. We had some older ticks. We've recently upgraded our ticks, thanks to the support of my bosses, which is amazing. And they showed me this warm spot on this wall in this bedroom. And so first thing we did before we just sunk an axe through that wall is let's look at the other side. Well, on the other side was that newly remodeled outside kitchen area with a gas, and so that heat with a gas fireplace. And so that heat signature was not as concerning because I'm like, yeah, okay. That fire had been on for a couple of hours, before we got the call, and, a little bit of radiant heat. It wasn't white hot on the tick. It was just, there was a temperature difference. Just not enough. Now, and I described in the article, right? So the owner of this home is a very prominent figure in our community, and which I learned while I was there because I was still a newer member to the Corvallis Fire Department at the time, and that he and his spouse had just invested a significant amount of money into a full remodel of their home. And when I talk about a significant amount of money, for a lot of the brothers and sisters that listen to this broadcast and all of the other command show broadcasts, what I'm trying to communicate to you is it is sometimes for many of you multiple years of salary that you earn as a professional firefighter that was invested into this remodel. So I certainly was not super eager to just start opening stuff up. And so anyways, lots of investigating, crawling under crawl spaces, getting into attics, just walking around and sniffing. And then here's something else that I've learned over the years. And it was, right, we all know that we go in, we take a few sniffs of something, and then we kind of get accustomed to something. So what I started doing, and I don't think I described this in the article, but what I started doing is I started rotating company members outside. 2 at a time, go outside, clear your nose, get some fresh air so we can come back in. And I had to do the same thing because you go into one room, you smell it, you go into another room, you don't. And then you start questioning yourself. Well, am I really smelling it? Am I not really? Is it on my turnout jacket? Right? Is it the last job that I went to that I'm smelling off my turnout jacket? Whatever. I don't know. Did I spill Chinese food on my uniform and that's what I'm smelling? Whatever. Right?
All the above are possible.
All the above are possible. I'm a shift BC. I eat on the run, right?
On the run.
So it is
Moving,
what
things.
it is. So anyways, so long story short, after all of this investigating, after all of this, looking and sizing up and evaluating and fact finding and all these things, we went back and looked at that wall again. And the difference when we looked at that wall was that the heat was expanding throughout the wall. The focus point on the wall was still the same, but then we were starting to be able to see the studs just a little bit. And we were starting to see the drywall screws just a little bit. And I'm like, that's it. And that was the trigger for me. And then for those of you that have seen the book and have seen the pictures, again, we wanted to be very, very methodical and very, very careful with how we were opening this up. Now, likely when the contractor comes in, that entire wall was probably going to get ripped down, redone, and repainted, and that's fine. But if it wasn't, we weren't going to be the ones that contributed to it. So we took all the time that we're supposed to. We brought the salvage covers in, we got the straight edges, we got the X-Acto knives and all of those things. And we had a young firefighter, Proby, who was there. I didn't stretch lines into the house or anything like that, but, we were there with a can, right? A good firefighter's tool is a can, a set of tools, that type of thing. And I just said, we don't know what this is going to do. If we introduce the right amount of air to it, it might kind of kick off a little bit. So I want you to be ready to dump that thing in there. And he was. It didn't. And son of a gun, there, and you could see it. You could see the active combustion that was going on, the white hot area around an exterior plywood cover. And what we discovered was that in the remodel, the contractor that installed the fireplace did not put fire brick in the fireplace, just put thin 1/4 inch thick decorative brick along the back wall. And the heat made it through, found a little crack, established itself. And that's what it was. And when we opened that wall and we found that, and we just couple of quick little shots from the can just to cool it off and all those types of things. The best thing that I've heard on an incident in a long time came from the owner of that home. He proclaimed to all of us, and I put it in the article. He said, "You just saved my house."
Yeah.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
And it felt really, really good.
Yeah.
And so, we cleaned everything up. We did a good bumper bonding afterwards. And the other thing that I really reaffirmed for the crew afterwards is I really tried to reinforce for them that the lieutenant was harping on himself pretty good. He's an exceptional paramedic and he's a very good company officer. But we are an EMS agency that goes to fires. We're not a fire department that handles EMS, right? And so he was kicking himself a lot. And I was like, LT, there's no kicking here. Have you ever had an incident like this before? Well, no. Okay. It's learning, it's growing. I needed to make sure that they were going away, not thinking that they had failed. And they hadn't. It was learning and it was growth and it was all those things. Each member of that crew, as soon as the book was published, got a copy of the book from me so that they could see their incident and their pictures in, a fire engineering bestseller. And just constantly reinforced for them. There were so many things that went right on that. And also being able to reinforce that it's really easy, especially for modern day firefighters who all they've known throughout their career is technology, to go straight to a tick, to go or take things at face value. And, and Doe knows this from our teaching together. I constantly harp on there is nothing better than a well-trained, well-intentioned firefighter with a functioning brain and 5 senses. I'll take that and a pickaxe and a Halligan and a can every day and be able to conduct the same work as ticks and this and that and all of the other things. And I'm not harping on those things because they're very, very strong tools. But we have to train the Jakes first in what we're really about, and then teach them how to use those to supplement who we are. Right.
What I hear you saying is, it's like we always say, paramedics save lives, but EMTs save paramedics, right? You have to be a good EMT before you can be a good paramedic. Before you have your drug box and your heart monitor and all your whiz-bam stuff that you have as a medic, you need to be able to just do a good raw patient assessment with your senses and talk to a patient. And that's how it is with our firefighters. In fact, towards the end of my tenure, the one and only rekindle I ever had was the one fire I didn't myself personally get my head up in the attic and look and check the top plate and look for smoke. I didn't use a tick. I never used a tick. I would always just use my eyes. Because the crew said, oh yeah, we ticked it, it's fine. Well, the tick isn't x-ray vision. I've been burned by the tick, no pun intended, with victims that weren't found and with fires that were still just skunking along that ended up becoming a rekindle a couple hours later. But you also said something else, which I appreciate, which was a couple things. From the size up standpoint, you talked about you kind of had a baseline heat signature from the tick, and then you checked it again, and then you saw the studs and the drywall screws. That's huge that you had a baseline, you took note of it, and then you checked it again. And that's really important. And it's harder to see those nuances when you have a ripping fire on you and you're on the Charlie side and you're looking at it. But those little things, vent point ignition, you start seeing changes in the construction or changes in the integrity of the building. Those little things are hard to pick up when your adrenaline's pumping at night and the fire's cranking and the radio's blowing. When you had this fire, you didn't have those extra stimuli to your senses that were competing with what would normally be hard to assess. But the principle is the same. The principle is the exact same, which was you had a baseline, you saw changes, and that's what allowed you to identify, yep, this is where it is. And that's a big takeaway I hope everybody hears on this story.
Yeah, those old fire service leaders that I talked about that I learned from, one of the very first fires, well, my first working job was on my second shift on probation. And I worked in the East Salinas Firehouse with 2 companies. And it was one of those ones where the door opened and, oh, look, there it is. I can see it. We're going to work today. And when it was all said and done, my battalion chief, who was just a great, great battalion chief back in the day, he's like, let me show you something. And he made me crawl up there with the attic ladder and get up there in the attic. He's like, now take your glove off. And he said, I don't want you to plunge your hand just into, blown in insulation. He said, but I want you to start feeling around a little bit. And he pointed to the union of the roof and 2 side walls. He's like, now I want you to slowly start digging in there. And sure enough, there was heat that, again, we didn't have ticks then, but he's like, he said, you're going to be a company officer someday. You're going to be a battalion chief someday. You're going to be the fire chief here someday. And he said, I would be failing you if I didn't teach you how to make sure that you're not going to come back and manage one of your fires a second time. And that's always stuck with me.
That's beautiful. And that's what's missing now. A lot of the time is we're so tasks oriented that we don't take that time to teach the people around us, especially like you went into this as the incident commander, the battalion chief. A lot of BCs would have stayed in their rig or stayed out at the command post and said, what do you got? Oh, nothing. Okay, we'll balance it. All right, I'm going to clear, and then leave. But you recognize that, hey, you know what? My lieutenant needs a little bit of support on this. We're a team. If he fails, we fail. And ultimately, you guys saved that owner's home. And not that it changes the priority, but you mentioned this is a prominent figure in the community. What if the fire department burns his house down after they leave? That wouldn't have gone well. So bigger picture there for everybody. So thanks for sharing. Sorry, it's great.
And we always go on, right? We've all been on hundreds, if not thousands, of smells and bills. Yeah. We do it all the time. And I just, I go into detective mode and I want to find out what that smell and what that bell is, and there, it's the little stuff. And, we always talk about the tools of the trade, and every tool has its purpose. And we all remember back positive pressure attack. That's the way to do business, right? And all that stuff. But, there are some times when you have a job and to help diagnose it, right? You put lines in place, you put a supply on the ground, you do everything. And it's like, okay, we're going to introduce 9,000 CFM and we're going to make this thing show itself.
Yeah. We're going to tempt the beast.
We're going to tempt the beast, but we're going to have our tools of battle in place so that we're going to keep the beast in the area that it's living. And that's been a very successful tactic, but not just willy-nilly.
Right.
No, we're leaning in.
It's calculated.
It's calculated. And there is a person who is standing next to that fan the entire time. So the instant we find it, turn that thing off.
Yep.
Kick it over. I don't care what you do with it. But yeah, so
put a probe in front of it.
Yeah, put a probe in front of it, hands up. Stop. All is well. Remain calm.
Remain calm.
Remain calm. But I'm a really big believer, especially thankfully as we transition more back into what our mission is, right, which is protecting Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And we're transitioning back into more of a focused search culture and those types of things. But every tactic has a place. Every tactic has a time, but it has to be well executed. You've got to have your plan. You've got to have everything in place. I'm a small, tiny department, and I have had first alarms in my department where it is me and one engine with 3 people on it, and the next engine is 17 minutes away once it gets staffed because it's a volunteer company. And I've had times where we have to transition. That's all we can do, right? I don't love transition as a first go-to, but there's times when that tactic is the appropriate tactic because that's just the staffing we have. So really and I'm really proud of Corvallis Fire Department. When I joined the organization, they were very, very much entrenched into the hit it hard from the yard concept as the only way to do business. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to work for me.
Yeah,
and fortunately,
it's an option.
It's absolutely an option. And there's a time and a place. Yeah. And fortunately, I have 2 wonderful bosses who give me a lot of grace and value the experience that I've brought to the organization. And we've been able to make some amazing strides in becoming more of a firefighting organization and doing size ups and doing the right way to do business. So.
And you described what most fire departments are in this country, which is, 1 to 4 stations, 1 to 5 stations or less.
Yeah.
That's the vast majority of who we're dealing with. So a lot of our listeners are going to relate. So Brian, jump in, brother. I know you got some stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brett, I think, backing up a little bit to your story, and where this is in the book, and then also kind of your lieutenant's feelings on this, it's important for all of us to understand that these confined space fires happen to everyone, and these on the fence fires happen to everyone. Do I go full tilt with this? Do I back out of it? Where are we at? Am I just tricking myself? On the commercials, even more so when we get into ballasts and belts and these types of things. So I think it's important that you do share this experience and we do talk about it. Me coming up in the fire service, I was more driven by textbooks, but when you get into Vincent Dunn's Collapse of Burning Buildings, you get into Clark's book, all these books, they did have a very heavy emphasis on building construction and, just your process. Let's find where this might be coming from. Crawl spaces, attic spaces, void space fires are really important things that we have to investigate because, as you said, we know that they're vent limited. So it's just a matter of time. The knee walls, the pipe chases, the soffits, crawl spaces, you go on and on with where these things might lie. And that's, starting in those locations is really important. So I love the methodology that you laid out there because it is very instructional as well as like, here's where we're worked through, but then that patience and persistence going back to that location, you dismissed it kind of initially as radiant heat, but you never gave up on it as a potential suspect. So great detective work all around.
I appreciate that. Yeah. It was a team effort for sure.
Well, and it exemplifies everything that is size up from pre-incident to dispatch to en route to on scene to verification and all that stuff. And to, like Brian said, get the layout of your first emphasis was construction. Okay. What are we dealing with construction wise here? Are there void spaces? What do we really have that could be spaces that this thing is cooking in? You mentioned about getting ahead of it and being prepared with a line and all that kind of stuff. I had a couple of fires that I wanted to relate to that are similar in the sense that, it's nothing kind of stuff. We got dispatched to a fire in a triplex one day, and it wasn't a fire. It was a smoke alarm sounding or smell of smoke or something. Well, what triggered me was the first arriving captain arrived from the street, said nothing visible, cancel the balance. And I said, negative. This is a new captain. I said, negative. We're going to continue the assignment. They get there and then what I saw was, because what triggered me was on the MDT, the update, which I think the captain missed, was odor of smoke. So I'm like, okay, we have an alarm sounding and an odor of smoke. We're not canceling anybody. And that was the trick. And even if from the street, that's nothing, we're still coming, but especially with the odor of smoke. And sure enough, as soon as they opened the door, I have video of it, smoke billowed out the front door of the apartment. And in the back was basically a mattress that was burning, that was starting to die out. It was starting to kind of burn itself out because of lack of oxygen, but you could have had somebody asleep on the couch easily in that apartment, And then we had another fire one time downtown Sacramento that was just cranking commercial, and they gave me Division Bravo, and it was within 5 feet of the commercial building is this 2.5-story walk-up Victorian. And, I said, all right, guys, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pre-position some hose lines on the street. We're going to get a water supply, and I want a truck on the roof. And I told command, I said, I want a full alarm, because if any of these houses goes, I want to be pre-positioned, like you talked about, Brett.
Yeah,
you were pre-positioning, and you had the water can ready, you had the tools ready, and you're thinking even beyond that. Sure enough, we're up there, and within about 20 minutes of us posting up, an attic fire kicked up in the attic of that house, and everybody was pre-positioned. It was perfect. So size up is about thinking in the future too. It's not just about seeing what you do see. It's about what you could see or what could happen. What I loved about your fire is you were constantly thinking in the next and the then and the what if. You were constantly out and ahead of it. And I know your crews benefited from that experience with you, no doubt.
Yeah. And, it's funny when I think about that and you talk about, the company officer missing something in CAD. Brian, I don't know if you know this about me, but I know Andoni does. Dispatch and communications is very near and dear to my heart. And, when we talk about command officers, none of us have been blessed ever to have an emergency incident technician, right, driving us around. So, I'm driving in the dark, in the rain, with 3 different radios and a computer and all of those other things. And our dispatchers, and I have some really, really good relationships with our dispatchers, and they're putting little things in as each caller calls in, or each statement that the caller makes, or whatever the case is, and it's easy to miss stuff. And what we're trying to work through with our dispatch system right now is, I put it in law lingo because I was a dispatcher. I dispatch police officers as well as firefighters and ambulances. And I call it structure fire in progress, right? If there's a robbery in progress on a law situation, they're keeping the caller on the phone. They're getting as much information as possible, and everything is being said over the radio to the responding officers. So they're having as much situational awareness as possible. But on the other side of the thing, the fire service in general is just tell us where to go, tell us what the problem is, we'll figure it out when we get there. No. We need to be getting that same situational awareness, because that one little entry of the 8 is going to get missed. I mean, it's not a 37-inch computer screen that's sitting on your desk, right? It's this tiny 12-inch screen. And, I don't know about you all, but, when you get over 50, these things don't work very well anymore. And it's like, oh, I only grabbed my those things. Oh, I only grabbed my driving glasses. I didn't grab I need to read that glasses too. And so trying to get, stats, Brian, right? I mean, how many victims are saved, on the stats that you're pushing out with firefighter rescue survey, that we are told about it from dispatch, right? It's a huge number. And that is such a critical component too of the entire size-up process, is getting good, solid information. Now, you have to take it with a grain of salt and factor it into your plan, but a good dispatcher can help you set up your incident for success pretty easily.
Agreed. And then, so I hate to completely shift the conversation, but as Chief Castro's kind of pointed out, the majority of fire departments around the country are smaller organizations, kind of what you're representative of. And there was a very, very important part in the very, very, very beginning of this discussion, and that was your decision on a cross-staffing of an apparatus. And that is something that a massive group of the fire service audience has to deal with at that time of dispatch. And now, granted, it's procedurally driven in some cases. At this station for a working fire, you'll take this apparatus or that one. There's places where it's across the board, one crew staffing an engine, a truck, and a heavy rescue. So, let's go back to that, and let's have a little bit of discussion on those types of things for you, because I mean, you're a seasoned battalion chief, but there's, in a lot of organizations, there's station captains that are making that call of which apparatus do I take? Do I split my resources? So, if you would, since we have you on and you're representative of that situation, can you speak to that size up decision-making process for your apparatus deployments?
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. So, right, one of the things from the very beginning is that this was right on the border between, I'll refer to them as engines, engine 2 and engine 1. Engine 2 is a 75-foot Pierce single axle quint. Okay, runs as an engine, but it's got an aerial device on it. So that was part of my decision making. The truck downtown is a 105-foot bucket. It's cumbersome, right? All of those things that come along with a bucket truck, and it's also a quint. So knowing that I was going to get an aerial device, a little bit shorter wheelbase, something that was going to be a little bit more flexible, in a neighborhood like that, made it a little bit easier for me to say, to the lieutenant down at ones, just bring the engine, don't bring the truck, right? The other part of that is I have to make a decision also, because if that truck from downtown is first in, it's, again, back to some, those of us that are familiar with truck work, the organization has always regarded it as a pumper with a ladder on the top of it. To me, it's a ladder truck with a pump. So we've been working really hard to talk about, okay, are you going in as a truck or are you going in as a pump? And so the next part of that is, if I take the truck with the first engine, 75-foot Quint on scene, where's my third company coming from for water? Because I'm certainly going to bypass, I'm going to take that 105-foot truck, and they're not going to grab a plug and lay in. They're going all in to do truck work, or all out to do truck work, right? Given the circumstance. So then my third engine in was another 4 or 5 minutes behind them. Now, one of the other things we're blessed with in this community is we're blessed with pretty much a hydrant on every corner. And so, and the first in engineer on that, he's not a big hulky fella, but let me tell you, he is strong as a frickin' ox. And I've watched him hand jack 400 feet of 5-inch hose without blinking an eye. And I know that's exactly what he would have done. And so there were, going back to size up, right? And those initial decision making, it's like, who are my crews? Who are my companies? How are they going to perform? How are they going to behave? He's one of the finest engineers that I've ever encountered in my career, for how he just runs his business as an engineer. And I think he'd be an amazing company officer. He's like, no, Chief, I'm not doing that. Nope. I'm certainly happy where I'm at. But, so yeah, back to that. I mean, as a command officer, I'm not just thinking about first in company, second in company and access. It's staffing. Where's the plug? How are we going to do this? And then I'm also thinking, well, one of the things I thought right quick was, if I don't take that truck and this fire blows through the roof in that tightly compacted Craftsman style neighborhood, and I don't have that second aerial device, am I going to be up the creek, so to speak? And, a term we've all heard at one point or another in the fire service, sometimes you're a hero and sometimes you're a hemorrhoid. And and I was rolling the dice just a little bit, but I felt like the odds were in my favor.
Well, you did highlight you did highlight what I was trying to get across, was that the depth of that decision was pre-gamed many different ways, many different days ahead of this incident. You in discussing the response to this, you passed on one sentence that I told the lieutenant, to take the engine instead of the truck. But as a BC, you've plotted this out on your Sunday drives and those types of things. Okay, not just is the truck going to fit down this road, but even to the depth of that order of arrival. Okay, if I take this, then it may be slower to get there. It puts this into place. So I love the chess game that you're taking your brain through, even if it's Hot Wheels on your table, or
right.
on your desk. The Chief's playing with the cars again. Well,
right.
These are critical components, and you drilled it all the way down to the people on the apparatus that day. So great discussion as far as those highlights. And Chief Castros, you certainly examine that in the book as well. Our response is our response as far as this many engines and this many aerials, but there's a lot deeper understanding of capabilities and training and awareness and pre-planning that goes into just something as simple as engine versus truck on that decision making. So thank you for expanding on that, Brett.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to add to that discussion, because it's really critical, is just like every fire service agency, we're going through that transition to a much newer generation of firefighter, and most of those young fire medics get stuck on the bus. Right. So we're trying to make sure that they are included in the firefighting component as well. And we look at our medic units as, they're utility players, right? They're firefighters, but they're also medics and everything else. And one of the things that we're having to teach, and I'm really sharing this for the other communities out there that have those utility players on a medic unit, is medics, you might get assigned to out, and then you might get assigned to search, and then you might, I've got to treat and transport somebody. So when you're getting your rig in there, remember your transport corridors. Be thinking about where are your plugs at the corners and not getting trapped in by a supply line and you can't get out. Now, sometimes it's going to happen, but feeding back that critical piece of information, I really drive it home with my medics, is like, hey, get in a position where you can transport out, get your gurney and gear up to the front of the structure, right? And it might not be them using it, but I've got plenty of medics on scene that can use that gear. But if you end up getting blocked in, don't worry. I'm not going to freak out about it, but you got to tell me. Command from Medic 125, we got blocked in by supply. We're not going to be able to transport because I'm going to bring in another medic, right? In those situations. And then I'll tell you also, and I'm not telling you anything I haven't said to my boss, but I'm a college town, right? I serve a college town. We get about 30,000 students on campus every year. And I've got center hall and garden apartments. And I've got 2.5 story, Victorians that have been parsed out into 14 and 15 little studio living areas, all over the place. And if I grab a first alarm, working fire in a multifamily dwelling, and everything's available, I have 4 engines and I have 2 medic units. And right, we're doing our math with multifamily dwellings. If we're told there's 1, there's likely 3, and I need something for a firefighter. If the firefighter gets hurt, I'm stuck. And, I think about these instances often. If I pull up on that cooking apartment fire at 2 a.m. and I've got 2 or 3 or 4 critically injured people plus people trapped, it's going to take a long, long time for me to get the resources I need to transport people where they need to go. And it's, it's so utilizing all of your resources as efficiently as you possibly can and setting yourself up for success, from the very beginning is so important, so vitally important.
Especially when you have, like you said, that you don't have resource-rich organizations or communities, but you have to rely on each other. Get that training going ahead of time. Act like there's no boundary, like you have a boundary drop, so you can be on the same page. Like you said, it'd be more efficient once you do work together. So it's like the first time you've met. Well, hey, this was wonderful. This is perfect. We're at the 45-minute mark. I want to wrap up by kind of summating what you talked about. Basically, was FPOD P. You said, look, here's the facts. I'm coming into a craftsman style home that's got limited access with an odor of some sort of smoke. Not sure. Probabilities. That's where that's where you strapped on the old feed bag and said, hey, I'm the old senior guy with the senior nose. I know there's a lot of more probabilities to this than meets the eye to the newer member, right? So you're thinking about those crawl spaces in the attic and the basement and all that kind of stuff. And then your own situation was, okay, this is what I got. Is this enough? Is it? And even your own situation, even at the beginning, hey, let's take this, not that. And all that was constantly going on. You illustrated that very clearly. You're constantly was thinking, okay, do I have enough resources? Do I have the right resources? What if this changes? And your decision was to be investigative, offensive, and your plan, had to adjust accordingly because all those little things kept tweaking. So there's ripple effect through the FPOD P. Loved it. Love it. So I hope people realize that, you don't have to talk about, dogs and cats sleeping together, the end of the world, Armageddon type fires to learn some good lessons. This was a fire that all of us go on. And if we're not smart, it will become a big fire if we don't treat it right when it's presenting itself. Unfortunately, other fire departments have paid the ultimate price. They have canceled resources. They did have nothing visible. And literally a firefighter died in a house fire because, and that's not pointing fingers. That's just the reality of this job. It gets real quick, as my friend, from FDNY told me one day. So thank you for your time, Chief Loomis. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. Good to see you too.
Yeah. Chief Brush, do you want to add anything to this or close out with any comments? Or
no, I think it's great. I think it's great to have Brett, again, share that experience, because these are the fires that aren't shared because we don't view them as big fires, but they are a big experience and there's a lot of education there. So thanks for contributing that to the book. Thank you for continuing to share, the message and expand the territory out there on command and the importance of it. So we're thankful for you, man. And I hope you have a great day.
Yep. Well, you guys too, be safe. I'm sure we'll all be talking very, very soon.
We will. So. And to that point, I do want to make an announcement. At FDIC in 2025, for the first time, we're going to have a hands-on element of mastering Fireground Command Calm the Chaos. And our friend Brett Loomis, who's one of our lead instructors at trainedfirefighters.com, is going to come out and help us teach that. So it won't be a pre-conference hands-on training. There will be a 4-hour pre-conference workshop. However, during the week, Wednesday and Thursday during FDIC, we will have 3 separate 4-hour sessions where you can come and do walkthroughs, talk-throughs with us, so a little more hands-on. So please keep that in mind. If you want any training for your department, hands-on, train the trainer, we come to you with multi-company drills and training. Please reach out to us at trainedfirefighters.com, or you can reach me at info@trainedfirefighters.com. I think, what do we have, almost 9 or 10 workshops already planned for 2025, Brett. I think we're going to Hawaii and all kinds of other places unknown.
A couple of places up here in Oregon, Medford, Clackamas, Idaho. Yeah, we're going to be all over the place.
Yep. So thank you, everybody. God bless you. God bless those who serve, those who lead, and God bless your families. Thanks, everybody.
In firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. For over 20 years, TheFireStore has equipped first responders with trusted gear featuring brands like MSA Carnes for helmets and Seek for thermal imaging cameras. Stay prepared. Visit TheFireStore.com today. The FireStore, your trusted safety partner.
This podcast is brought to you by Flex 7 from TenCate Protective Fabrics. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology. Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencatefabrics.com/Flex 7.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with Magnegrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit Magnegrip